Hi guys, welcome back to Whisper of the Wind Creepypasta live broadcast. Earlier I had a live streaming, but the sound was actually muffled. I didn't realize it until an hour after my live stream. So here I am. I'm going to do another live stream. My dog is already asleep. But this time I'm going to read True Philippine Ghost Stories. So I hope that you're gonna like it. And this book that I'm gonna read is True Philippine Ghost Stories book number 10, book 10. So for our first story, this is Damned Store by John Paul A. Deveza. The story I'm about to tell you happened a year ago when I was part of the kitchen crew at an old restaurant on Timog Avenue. At night, I could feel that someone was watching me, or someone would whisper in my ear, even though nobody was around. Even in the comfort room, customers would complain of being watched, and the scent of lighted candles filled the area. If you sat in the center cubicle of the women's CR, you could feel a strong presence hanging above it. We were preparing cake orders for the Christmas season, one December. We have this old walk in Chipak chiller to house the large cakes. When the delivery van came by at around 1 in the morning, I went inside the chiller to check the temperature. As I opened the door, I saw something that made me go pale, and my hair stood on end. Lying inside was a balding man in his late 20s. In his right hand was a wooden cross. He held a knife in his left. I stood there speechless and unable to move. I closed my eyes, hoping the apparition would disappear. When I opened my eyes, the man was looking at me. I stood there petrified. The man extended the bloody arm holding the knife and pointed it towards me. I screamed and ran. The delivery guy calmed me down. My crewmate, who had been working there for 15 years, told me I had just seen Roland. The delivery guy, Roland was the guard on duty, and part of his job was to check on the cakes. One night, he went inside one of the walk-in chillers to check its temperature when he absent-mindedly closed the door, locking himself inside. The chiller could only be opened from the outside, and it was impossible for him to get out. He banged and kicked at the door, but to no avail. He was only found the next day when the delivery van driver and the manager came to check on the chiller. The police said Roland died of freezing. Some have said that as he struggled for air inside, he cut his wrists to quicken his death, hence his bloody hand. Since then, no one dared to check on the cakes alone, especially at night. Most of us have seen Roland's ghost, even after the store had been blessed. The end of the first story. Guys, I'll just make a check on the sound quality before I continue. So let me just turn off my microphone and I'm just gonna listen. I'll continue right after I check that the live stream sound quality is okay. Please wait. All right, I'm back. And it seems that the sound quality is okay. You may have heard some loud noises from outside. Those are our neighbors who are using boga, which is actually bawal. So yeah, please bear with me because I cannot control the sounds outside. By the way, my dog is already snoring here. So now I'm gonna read the second story. This is Letty by Charina S. Blaza. When my Lola Yolanda was 24, she had a friend from Quezon named Letitia Gimps. Letitia hanged herself in 1955. Letitia, or Letty, was friendly, and she always had many companions. Every time there was an occasion in the barrio, she would be there dancing, eating, drinking, and even cuddling with some men. But as much as she was friendly with other people, she was the opposite at home. Cassava? Again? She complained to her mother. Sorry, anak. This is all we can afford. Aling Tali, her mother said. Where's Tatay? Father. Letty said. He's gone, anak. He went back to his wife in Saria. Her mother said tearfully. Curse word. Pambihira naman talaga si tatay. Letty screamed as she left the house. Letty never returned to her house, leaving her mother and her younger sister to fend for themselves. For the next 3 years, Aling Tali did not eat or sleep well. She was always worried about Letty's fate. She eventually got sick, and her neighbors brought her to the hospital. Lena, Letty's sister, took over her mother's job as a chick vendor. One day, Lena noticed a familiar face in a tabloid newspaper. It was her sister Letty. She had become an actress in Manila. When Aling Tali got better, she went back to work. She and Lena sold chicks by the roadside to earn enough money to get to Manila. Upon their arrival in Manila, they discovered that Letty was in Valenzuela, acting in a street play. They went there and watched the evening show. Afterwards, they approached their beloved Letty. Who are you? Go away, Letty cried upon seeing them. Leave me alone. Those words hurt Aling Tali, but she didn't give up. Every time there was practice, she would be there, watching and smiling at her daughter. Letty continued to ignore her. After a year and a half, Letty had become quite successful as a stage actress. All through that time, her mother would watch and smile at her. Letty wouldn't mind her, not even sparing her a look. But one day, she glanced at her mother. She was watching her, as always. But Letty saw that her mother's nose was bleeding. The other day, she saw her mother losing her hair. At times, she saw her pale and her eyes white. But Aling Tali was always smiling. Sometimes Letty would hear chopping sounds, which reminded her of her mother slicing the cassava. She would also hear chicks under her bed. Letty shared all this with my Lola Yolanda, who was her assistant at that time. Lola assumed they were just hallucinations caused by the pills Letty took. The worst, according to my Lola Yolanda, was when Letty told her that she saw her mother with a bleeding face and her teeth had fallen off. She was crying, but smiling still. Letty wanted to run outside the room, but Aling Tali was standing by the door and slowly approached her. Letty covered herself with a blanket. When she dared to look again, the image of her mother had disappeared. The next day, Letty searched for her mother. My Lola and Letty eventually found her house in Balagtas, Bulacan on Christmas Day. Letty's younger sister Lina met them. Letty asked her where her mother was because she wanted to apologize. "You can never do that," Lina said. "Nanay died 2 days after she talked to you." Shocked, Letty could only cry. "Nanay was rushing to your set to give you a letter, but she was hit by a speeding car." Lina went on to describe how the blood burst from her face and how her teeth fell to the ground. Aling Tali died on the spot. Before my Lola and Letty left, Lina gave their mother's letter to her sister. The following day, my Lola found out that Letty had committed suicide. In Letty's pocket was the letter from her mother. "Take care, love, Nanay," was all it said. The end. Third story, Intramuros Shadow by Alexander John M. Dugho. The walled city of Intramuros is a place where we can go to relax, have fun, or simply hang out. It has become a center of enjoyment. But Intramuros served as a battleground during the World War II. There is no doubt that many people died there during the war. And there is no doubt that it is haunted. What with all the spirits roaming the grounds? A friend of mine who was sensitive acts strange there. Knowing her abilities, I would sometimes ask her, "May nakikita ka, no? You're seeing something." But she would never tell us whatever it was she saw. The first time I saw her bothered was when we did a shoot there last semester, when we had to make a movie as a final project. We had chosen Intramuros as one of our locations for a night shoot. At first, I didn't know why my friend suddenly announced a cut. We walked over to her and asked her what was the matter. She indicated the video camera and told us to watch the playback. She replayed the scene we had just taken, and we saw that it blurred many times. The camera was mounted on a tripod, which immediately ruled out shaky hands. The image just suddenly blurred but returned to normal. My sensitive friend told us that it was a mist ghost. Maybe it was just some technical glitches, but none of us could explain what happened. But what really scared me happened last October 22, a Friday. We had received our class cards and we decided to hang out in Intramuros to celebrate. My parents were not keen on letting me stay out late, and so by 8 o'clock, I bid my friends farewell and asked them if anyone else was leaving. Oma and Dida said that they too had to go home and walked with me to the exit. As we climbed down the wall, Dida spotted a group of freshmen, one of which lived near her. She bid us goodbye and went with the freshmen, much to Oma's indignation, for she had expected Dida to accompany her on the trip home. and now she was making the trip alone. I volunteered to go with her as far as I could. She was headed north while I was headed south, and off we went to get our rides. We must have walked about 20 feet when I felt someone following us. I saw a shadow on my left. I turned to look and saw someone behind us that I didn't recognize. I didn't know why, but I just suddenly felt nervous about him. Even though there were other people, I didn't know walking around the place. I felt strange about that man. When we walked another 10 or 15 feet, Oma looked behind us. I was surprised when she said that Dida was following us. I also looked, and indeed, Dida was standing there looking at us. Oma and I were both surprised at how fast Dida had caught up to us. I felt something wrong with the situation, but I couldn't place my finger on. Sinundan mo pala kami? So, you followed us after all, I said. Oma, who was still feeling a bit resentful, said, "Sige, ganyan ka, Dida. Lagi mo lang akong iniiwan." "You're like that, Dida. You always leave me." Dida just laughed her unmistakable laugh. "Let's go," I said, and we resumed walking. After taking a couple of steps, though, Oma and I turned around at the same time to find out that Dida had vanished. If she had walked away, we would have been able to see her. I felt a cold chill creep up my spine, and I'd bet Oma was feeling the same thing too. At first, we asked each other where Dida could have gone, but feeling it was something we could not explain, we continued on home. The feeling of someone following us did not go away the whole time we were there. I felt it somewhere behind me to my left. Sometimes I would turn around to check, but we were alone. Only when we left the gates of Intramuros did the feeling of someone following us go away. A few days later, we asked Dida if she had followed us that night. She said she didn't, which caused my arms to break out in goosebumps. The end. Next story, Ang Pansit by Boo. This happened to my cousin a few years ago in Zamboanga. It had been 10 years since my cousin's father had died. My cousin and his family were so busy with their own lives that they had forgotten their father's death anniversary. They noticed that there was pancit bihon on the kitchen table. They were all puzzled because not one of them had had the time to cook. When they checked it out, nobody was in the kitchen, not even a cat or dog. It was only then that they remembered it was their father's death anniversary. Next story, My Experiences in Grade 6 by Peekaboo Rinoa. Early Morning Madness. This story happened when I was grade 6. I was studying in a Catholic school in Caloocan. I wake up at 4 because the school service picks me up at 5, and we usually get to school by 5:30, long before the flag ceremony at 6:30. One December morning, I decided to go up alone to my classroom to finish my social studies assignment. My classroom was on the top floor, and it was my barkada's habit to wait for each other by the entrance before heading to our room. As I climbed the stairs, I felt that the air was unusually cold and a bit eerie. In the classroom, I closed the windows, but even with them closed, I still felt cold. My friends haven't arrived yet. When I finished my assignment, thinking that they were downstairs by the entrance waiting for me, I decided to go down and meet them. I made a detour to the bathroom first to tidy up and relieve myself. When I looked in the mirror, I heard running water in the last cubicle. Even though I was scared, I forced myself to investigate. My mind was filled with scary images of headless priests and white ladies. White ladies. There was no one in the cubicle. I was totally alone in the bathroom. I closed the cubicle door and went back to the mirror to fix my hair. I felt myself being watched. I turned around to look at the door to the bathroom, but nobody was there and nobody had come in. When I looked back at the mirror, I saw a black lady beside me. I couldn't scream. It seemed like my voice box had turned to ice. My legs felt weak and I went down to my knees. Nothing registered in my mind, not even the ringing of the first bell that signaled the flag ceremony. I felt her eyes pierce my very being. I could not even blink. When I slumped to the door, the lady was still looking at me. After what seemed like hours, she disappeared. I unsteadily got to my feet and ran down to the quadrangle. It was still dark and I felt someone following me. My friends asked me where I had been as I joined the line. I tried to talk, but no words came out. When the ceremony started, it was an effort to participate, especially during the Panatang Makabayan, because I was still shaking from my experience. Only when we got to our classroom did I tell them what happened. They screamed in fright, and none of us ever used that CR ever again. After that event, I was able to perceive the unseen with my sixth sense. That experience opened my third eye. But I'm not too thrilled by this gift. Who in his right mind would want to see scary creatures every day? Retreat. Next story. As a graduating student, I was required to attend the seniors retreat in Tagaytay for 3 days and 2 nights for reflection and meditation. The trip to Tagaytay was exhilarating, but it was raining when we got there. It was already noon, and the priest had us eat lunch first before we started. After lunch, we checked where we were going to sleep. The room that was assigned to us had 5 double-deck beds. My barkada chose the beds near the windows, since we noticed that there were no electric fans in the room. During dinner, the priest announced that he would hear confessions in the room beside the refectory. We set up chairs outside the room to serve as a waiting area. The air was cool and soothing that night. As I talked to my classmate while waiting our turn, I felt someone was looking at me. I looked around, but there was no one else there. My batchmates had already gone to their rooms. I ignored the feeling and went up to the priest when it was my turn. When I was done, I waited for my friend to finish, so we could go to our room together. I still had a feeling that someone was watching me, but I didn't mention this to my friend. I didn't want to freak her out, since she knew that I had an open third eye. Before we slept for the night, we chatted with each other. I glanced out the window and I saw a girl standing beside the mango tree. I thought it was my imagination, coupled with my nearsightedness. But as I lay in bed, I felt something cold caress my legs and arms. I immediately sat up, and one of my friends, Annie, asked me why. I told her, and she said that she had felt it too, but had ignored it. Annie and I shared a bed that night, feeling secure in each other's company. During the night, I saw a lady dressed in white pass by our beds, going around the dormitory. When she peeked at our bed, I was shocked to see that she was gruesome. Her cheek was torn, its skin already black. Blood dripped from her hair. Her eyes were almost falling out of the sockets. I trembled in fear. Annie must have felt me shaking because she asked me what was wrong and why I was so cold. My friend in the next bed was also awake, and she said she also felt something cold. She described her feeling to me and asked if that was what I felt. I said yes, and added jokingly, "Welcome to my world." I could see the lady roaming around the room, and I just prayed that we would all be safe. I tried to sleep, but I tossed and turned, my inner defenses alert. I was finally able to sleep at around 3 a.m. Sometimes in the night, I was awakened by the sound of whispering. My classmates were talking to each other because they were all awakened by one of us screaming. That girl was coming from the bathroom, and she had screamed in terror when she saw a nun walk past her. I, on the other hand, did not hear her because I was tired from my lack of sleep. All of us weren't able to sleep after that. We talked for about a few hours about our experiences until the breakfast bell rang. We were glad that nothing untoward happened the following night. The white lady had only seemed to welcome us. When we asked around, we found out that the seniors before us had also seen her during their first night. Next story, Habulin by Storytella. Pumunta ako sa bahay ng best friend ko at doon kami nag-lunch. Habang kumakain kami, bigla siyang napatigil at napatingin sa room ng parents niya. Kaharap niya ang room at that time. "Someone's there," sabi niya. Tiningnan ko rin ang room and I saw in my mind that a lady was peeping through the door. Confirmed na nakita ko. Dahil pareho ang description namin ng best friend ko, kahit hindi niya sinabi sa akin kung ano ang itsura ng nakita niya noong una. Pero dahil gutom kami, hinayaan lang namin. Biglang sumara ang pinto, pero wala namang hangin. Nagtitigan kami ng best friend ko. Naramdaman ko na lumabas ng kwarto ang babae at lumapit sa amin. Nag-open na naman ang pintuan at doon kami napatigil sa aming pagkain. Malapit ang water dispenser sa kwarto at buti na lang at nakakuha na ako ng tubig. Pero gustong kumuha ng tubig ng best friend ko at since ako itong matapang, nakisuyo siya na isara ko ang pintuan. Sa ngalan ng pagkakaibigan ay sinara ko ang pintuan. Biglang naramdaman ko ang malamig na kamay ng sino mang naroon. Hindi ko na ito sinabi sa best friend ko at baka lalo pa siyang matakot. Sinabi ko na lang sa kanya na umalis na kami sa bahay nila. One time naman ay kasama niya ang mga former classmates niya. 4 sila ng time na yon, puro lalaki. Dumaan sila sa science college namin. Nagtaka siya kung bakit biglang nanlamig ang paligid even though napakainit ng gabing yon. Mas lalong nagtaka ang best friend ko nang biglang nagtakbuhan ang mga kasama niya. Siyempre tumakbo na rin siya dahil ayaw niyang magpaiwan. Nang tumigil na sila kakatakbo, tinanong niya kung bakit bigla silang tumakbo. Tanong din ang sagot ng mga kaibigan niya. Pare, hindi mo ba nakita na may sumusunod sa yung white lady? Seriously, I can't see kung bakit habulin ng kaibigan kong iyon. Okay, medyo nakakatawa yung kwento. Okay, let's look at the next story. This is The Man with No Feet by Joanna Marie B. Verceles. One night, my cousins and I were making pancakes for a midnight snack. I received a text message from my boyfriend that he was dropping by. I went outside and checked to make sure that the gate was unlocked. When I returned to the kitchen, my cousins had already gone upstairs. When I continued cooking, impatiently waiting for my boyfriend, there was a knock on the gate. I thought it was my boyfriend, but when I got closer, I realized it was someone else. The man by the gate was tall and was staring at me. I looked down and I saw that he had no feet. I ran back inside the house, but he kept knocking. When I reached the kitchen, I didn't hear him anymore. Minutes passed and I heard someone knock again. I was hesitant to go outside because I was afraid to see the man without feet. The knocking stopped and my cell phone beeped. My hands were shaking as I checked the message. My boyfriend was outside, waiting for me to open up. Next story is Boarding House by May M. This scary experience happened about 4 years ago when I was in first year high school. My cousins, brothers, and I lived in a boarding house we rented from one of my mother's friends. It had 2 floors and 4 bedrooms. My brothers occupied the bedroom on the ground floor. On the second floor were the other 3 bedrooms. 1 room for my cousins, 1 for the other boarders, and the smallest room for me. My windows face the street, and the passers-by can see me from the street. It was 9 in the evening, and I was reviewing in my room in preparation for exams the next day. I was sitting on my bed with my back against the window as I read my notes. My cousin called me from downstairs, informing me that I had a phone call. I hurriedly went down, not bothering to turn off the lights and the electric fan. I had been chatting with my friend Arlene when I heard someone call me from outside the house. "May, May," he shouted. Why was he shouting when I was downstairs and near the gate? I told Arlene that I was going to check on who was calling me. It was my friend John. He was surprised when he saw me. "Kanina ka pa ba dyan sa telepono? Have you been on the telephone long?" he asked. "Oo no, nagtataka nga ako sa inyo kung bakit kayo sumisigaw dyan sa labas, nandito lang naman ako." "Yeah, I have been wondering why you were shouting when I was just down here," I said. "Sigurado ka? Are you sure?" Oo naman, kahit kausapin mo pa si Arlene. Yeah, I'm sure. You can even talk to Arlene, I said irritably. John then held my arms and dragged me outside. My other friends, Clark and Jenny, were outside. They looked shocked when they saw me. I wondered what was going on. Clark pointed to my room and said, Kung kanina ka pa dyan, sino yung babae sa kwarto mo? If you've been down here all along, then who is the woman in your room? I looked up at my room and saw a silhouette of a girl. She had hair as long as mine, and she was sitting in the same spot I was in while I was reviewing my notes. We all went up to check. We braced ourselves and counted to three before flipping open the door. To our surprise, no one was there. We went back outside, and when we looked up, the silhouette was gone. I was afraid to sleep in my room that night, so I asked my cousins if I could sleep with them. The boarders also had weird experiences around the house. One boarder, Marisol, was headed to the CR one night when she saw a little boy sitting by the stairs and rocking his body. Ilona, another boarder, was hanging her wet clothes in the bodega when she saw an old man in a barong in the corner of the room. Then there were items that would get lost, but when we looked in the place we saw it last, it would be there. Sometimes plates and glasses would fall off the table without anyone touching them. Alright, maybe this would be our last story for this live stream. This is The Angry Spirit by Kenneth Gimpayan. We were in Olongapo, a small island in Cebu, for our geography class doing a research study. After our studies, we gathered by the campfire and shared ghost stories. When the fire died, we joined a group of teachers that were having a drinking session. It was then that Tess asked me if I believed in ghosts and ghost stories. I had met Tess in the same class in a university in Cebu. She looked Japanese, and when I got to know her better, revealed that she was from Japanese descent. Of course I do, I said to her. With a bland but strange look on her face, she said, Then you have to believe my story. Why? What happened? I asked. I keep hearing about people telling ghost stories of the friend of their friend of their friend, but never a person with first-hand experience. Have you experienced one? I asked again. Yes, I even have a third eye, Tess replied. I chuckled, perhaps to express mockery, but I saw in her eyes that she was serious. I insisted that she tell me about her experience. Okay, but promise me you wouldn't tell anyone else, she whispered. Every summer, my family and I would always go to our rest house in Leyte. Ever since I was young, I would see and feel paranormal phenomena in the house. One time, I was sitting on a chair and a couple of shadows kept following me. The shadows seemed to float everywhere without being attached to anything. They didn't look flat, and they looked three-dimensional, like a real person. I was scared for the first time I saw them, but I grew accustomed to them as I saw them more often. Are you sure about this? You see, the mind is very playful. Eyes also have complex lenses, and the images that you saw might have been reflections, I said. Ken, I was there, and to me, they were real. Tess replied. Could it be possible that you were just imagining things? Anyway, please continue your story, I said. The horror didn't stop there, she continued. One day, an old woman told us never to put away the Santo Nino statue that was in the altar outside because someone might come. But as time passed, the house grew old and had to be renovated. We forgot about the old woman's warning and removed the Santo Nino from its altar and placed it somewhere inside the house. One night, I dreamt of soldiers fighting in a battlefield. One of them struck me with his sword, and I actually felt it cutting me, as if it were real. I woke up from my dream, and I saw a hand holding a knife, trying to reach for my feet. I rubbed my eyes to make sure I wasn't seeing things. Then I saw that the hand belonged to a white lady with long hair kneeling outside my mosquito net. What got my attention were her ferocious eyes. She seemed to be very angry with me. I didn't know why. It was like she was holding a grudge against me. You're definitely kidding me now, I said. She horrified me, but instead of freezing in terror, I managed to shout at her, Kinsa man ka? Who are you? She made a rattling sound while her jaw dropped, which almost reached the floor. She quickly ran outside, seemingly afraid to reveal her identity. I totally freaked out on seeing her jaw drop that I didn't know what to do. I ran out through the same door she went through and headed to my parents' bedroom near the stairs. To my surprise, the second floor was filled with an eerie aura. The hallway looked misty and black, and it felt so cold. I could barely see where I was going. The sound of footsteps made me turn. There was the lady looking at me. She was holding the knife, and her big black furious eyes were locked on me. She was slowly coming up the stairs, intending to get me. I tried getting into my parents' room, but it was locked. I screamed in panic and banged hard on the door. Tabang! Tabang! Help! Help! I shrieked in fright. She was only a few steps away from me when the door finally opened. I hugged my parents and tearfully told them what happened. They did not believe me because when they peered into the hallway, there was nobody there. They comforted me and advised me to calm down. After that confrontation with the lady, I still could not forget her anger. What have I done to deserve it? Have I insulted her? Have I offended her feelings? That woman must have experienced something so terrible for her to act like that. She acted angrily, and I could smell her need for revenge. My parents also told me never to tell anyone about the incident. My mom said that if I did, the bad spirit might follow me. Great pitch. The story sounds familiar though. Does the movie The Grudge ring a bell? I asked Tess. What is it about? She asked. She had never seen or even heard The Grudge or The Ring movies. She had avoided horror movies because she didn't want to be scared. I knew then that she was not joking and that it truly happened. Maybe she was on drugs or drunk too much that night, but she reacted with a faint smile and denied doing those things. I noticed that she wasn't partaking in the drinking session, where one must drink even just a little, as a sign of respect. She refused to drink anything at all. She regretted relating the story to me. Even her best friend did not know it. I asked her if she had seen the lady lately. I prayed that I never see her again, she said as she shook her head. I haven't seen her again since that night, but I will never forget. She wouldn't let me. Okay, that's the end of the story, and I think this would be the end of our live stream as well. So, thank you guys for joining me. Merry Christmas once again, and say goodbye, Hachiko. Okay, here's your camera. Bye bye. Okay, good night, everyone. Thank you for watching.